Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalren. In today's video, we'll be checking out all the brand new Rogue AZERITE traits Rogues are getting in patch 8.1. There are all the traits available except for one for Outlaw, which I will still review in this video, but I might just make a whole separate video at a later time. Rogues have actually got some decent new changes, as in the amount of changes is actually substantial. Whether the changes are good or not, that's a whole another story. I feel for the most part it could have drawn a shorter straw, so these changes are decent. I think there's a lot of potential to a lot of these changes to the different playstyles of Rogues, but there's definitely a lot of criticism and constructive criticism to come to how some of these traits should better work. One of the things Blizzard wanted to do is make as least of passive traits as possible, and a lot of the spec-specific traits a lot more impactful. So when taking a look at all these traits, we'll be taking a look at their passiveness as well as if they have any kind of interesting mechanic. Do they change the gameplay at all, or are they just straight up powerful or not? So I'm going to go over every single one of the traits, whether they got changed or recently added, and I'm going to do them in a specific order. First, I'll tell you what the trait is, if it's new or if it got changed, the pros, the cons, and best how I would end up using that trait. First of all, let's start with First Dance. First Dance is one of the traits that got changed in patch 8.1. It now generates 2 combo points, which doesn't stack whenever you use Shadow Dance, and grants you haste. The haste effect is stackable. Now, I actually like this change, and there's a lot of pros to it. First of all, I like the combo point generation that comes from it. It almost feels like preparation from way back in the day, when Rogues would use preparation in Stealth or in Shadow Dance in order to generate extra 2 combo points. So it's basically preparation baked into Shadow Dance. And I do like it because it offers more flexibility for bursty situations in PvP as well as in PvE. It means that with the Shadow Dance generating 2 extra combo points, you don't have to waste a global building up that Shadow Strike. You can really get into more eviscerates. The more eviscerates Subtlety puts out, generally the more damage you do. What I also like about this is its combo points generated per Shadow Dance charge, so there's actually Talent's playability to give you maybe instead of 2 charges of Shadow Dance, 3. And so you can get your dances back faster. It allows you actual changes to gameplay for both PvE and PvP. And I think it's actually really good because it makes you think. It forces you to adjust your playstyle even by a little bit. It tells you that you don't need to get as many Shadow Strikes as necessary, and you can get more eviscerates out. So it makes you watch for your energy bar as well as your combo point bar to make sure that you are not going to be overcapping or overdrawing, and you're only sinking the amount of Shadow Strikes that is needed. It actually makes you think. It makes you actually, pull back. The cons of it are, why haste? Why is the haste the stat that we end up getting for First Dance? Out of all the different stats, you could have gotten this crit, which is a, RNG chance. Versatility would have been a nice buff. Mastery would have been the best, and Blizzard knows that Mastery is the best for Subtlety. Hell, even a small amount of agility would have been nice too. But Blizzard chose haste. Haste is only useful when you're doing purely single target damage and you get more auto attacks during your dance charges, which I guess has some, if let's say you're going for bursty setup and you get a beefy Shadow Dance and you get an auto attacks during that beefy Shadow Dance, I guess that's a way to add extra damage, but I feel like it's a way for Blizzard to control that this trait doesn't get overscaled and doesn't get too heavily stacked for a reason. My best use for this trait would be only to run one of them, in shoulders, chest, or headpiece, any one of those options, but only one, because you want the combo point generation from Shadow Dance. That is awesome. The haste itself is you can kind of just take it or leave it. The next trait is called Replicating Shadows, and this one is a brand new one. This trait is a bit more difficult to explain, but when you use a finisher on a target infected by Nightblade, it now has a chance to deal extra shadow damage, 10% per combo point spent into said finisher, and has a chance to jump onto a next target. So it's a Nightblade that off of finishers might generate a little bit extra shadow damage and has a pretty small chance to jump on other targets. This is an okay trait. Some of the ways to change it though, with stacking, the damage self stacks, the percentage does not. And even though, let's say, most of you guys are going to be using 5 combo point eviscerates, so 10% per combo point into the finisher, so that's 10 times 5, 50%. You would think that this trait would be popping off a lot more, but it doesn't really pop that much on PTR. It feels like it's actually lower than 50%, so maybe Blizzard has some of their numbers low. It definitely doesn't feel like 50. It doesn't feel like I'm getting nearly as many ticks or nearly as many hops. Some of the pros of this trait are, technically it is shadow damage, so it does bypass armor. So whether you're going against tanky players in PvP or bosses in PvE, technically it is extra shadow damage. It does spread to multiple targets, that's another advantage of it. So let's say you're in an AoE situation, you're going to be hitting Shuriken Storm and eviscerating the main target with Nightblade. That Nightblade has a chance to jump onto other targets, so those Shuriken Storms are technically doing a little bit extra damage to those targets infected by Nightblade. So maybe it can be a bit more damage for you, but yeah, it's kind of minor. Some of the cons of this trait is boring. It's very, very passive. It doesn't really affect your gameplay that much. And I feel like it's a lost potential for Blizzard, and I will count this as a con, because there's no synergy with talents around it. Because I was hoping, let's say you got an enemy with Nightblade, right? You're gonna hit him with a couple of eviscerates, and he's standing in a pack of trash packs, like train dummies for example, and you spread Nightblade on multiple enemies. But what if I hit them all with Secret Technique? Secret Technique, with what it was read, is kind of like a AoE cleave, single target E type of finisher. Like, you'll hit the enemy, and then enemies around you will also get hit by Secret Technique. I was hoping it'd be similar to Death from Above, where Death from Above was like a two-part finisher. It was the AoE finisher and a single target. So I was hoping it would be separate finisher for every one of the targets. So in a sense, Secret Technique could spread Nightblade to everybody around you, instead of just, one target. But there's literally no synergy. I've been sitting and hitting train dummies for 30 minutes trying to see if I can get it to work, and so far, nothing. Overall, I think this trait is okay for single target, maybe if you want to grab one. So if you get this trait as from a new piece of gear, I guess it's not the worst trait possible. It does technically leap to nearby targets on random finishers, so maybe there's some AoE cleave possibility with it. There's definitely no synergy with Secret Technique though, and it's kind of sort of an AoE. It's like a mix of an AoE and a single target trait, but you're not quite sure if it's bad or not. I guess it's not the worst trait possible, but the way it was constructed, it doesn't really offer anything new or fun or interesting to the gameplay. It's just there and it works, but I don't know, not really a trait I was looking forward to. The next trait is for Assassination, named Nothing Personal, and no, it does not work off of Shadow Step, which honestly it should. It basically is nature damage during Vendetta, and it's stackable damage. It is buffed by Versatility and Mastery for sure. I tried different pieces of gear, and on Tooltip the number does go up with Mastery and Versatility, so it does work off of your gear. So I guess if you have a Mastery heavy build, maybe it might be useful there. So some of the positives of this trait, since it is so simple and we don't really have anything to go into, it does allow Dispatch as a viable talent. Blizzard has stated before that they feel that there's too many traits that force you to go away from Dispatch. You're forced to either go Elaborate Planning or Master Poisoner. So technically this trait does open up viability for maybe Dispatch as a viable talent option, but Dispatch right now hasn't been the pick because it's just not as powerful and doesn't sin quite as well, so I don't really know if they'll fix that. Technically, it's a pretty decent trait for good short-term burst, especially in PvP. In PvP, you're just trying to score a kill with Vendetta, you're just trying to nuke the target down, so while you might not be able to get that nature damage throughout the fight all the time, at least you'll have it during Vendetta, and if you have a couple different stacks for it, then that's again extra damage that you can sink into your target. The cons of this, I feel like this trait on its own is just not that good, because it does fall behind of Shrouded Suffocation. You would think that Nothing Personal with insane amounts of like double stacked poison damage would give you insane burst, but I actually found myself doing more damage just going for one Shrouded Suffocation and like two boring traits than double of Nothing Personal, so it just, I don't know, it disappointed me a little bit. I also feel like it's definitely limited in terms of its uptime on the boss. Even with Toxic Blade for extra nature damage that you can apply, it only is there during Vendetta, so that damage is there for a bit and then it's gone. If I were to use this trait, I guess it's a decent passive and does technically let you use Dispatch if you want to play around with Dispatch at any moment, but maybe I would use it as only one stack at worst, but I feel like there's other traits currently right now in the game to replace it. The next trait we got for Assassination is called Echoing Blades, which is a Fan of Knives trait. Before you write this one off because it's a purely AoE trait, I actually think you should hear it out. Fan of Knives damage is increased by a set amount, which is stackable, and for the first 5 crits it'll fire a second spray of knives for a certain amount of damage, which is also stackable. So the part where it says for the first 5 crits on a target doesn't seem to work. The way this trait seems to work right now is every time Phantom Knives crits on an enemy, there's going to be a mini set of knives on top of target location that also sprays out. So it's almost like a baby Phantom Knives on top of enemy that just got crit by a regular Phantom Knives. So it doesn't have the whole stipulation functional for the first 5 crits thing. It doesn't make sense in the tooltip. I really think Blizzard should maybe change it. Maybe they should give it like a % chance. If Phantom Knives crits, then it has a chance to fire instead of like the whole 5 first crits, because that just seems confusing for everybody. So some of the advantages of this trait is the AoE for Assassination becomes a lot stronger. Just for going through a basic rotation without popping any burst cooldowns at all, your sustain is just that much better. And I'm not even playing with Shrouded Suffocation, Crimson Tempest build. I'm literally running around Phantomizing and dotting up people with Rupture. The extra fan damage that comes out whenever crits is actually pretty strong. So the burst you get out of this for AoE, instead of having like very rampy bursts, you know, first I gotta Rupture this guy, and then this guy, and then Rupture this guy, and then I gotta build combo points, and then Crimson Tempest. It feels like you skip a lot of that step, and you start doing big damage off the bat. Every global is just a PAM. Very decent damage, but it is heavily stacked for AoE, so there's no single target potential here, which is, we're coming down to the cons, is again, only AoE. Literally no single target potential. I even tried to go for a Nightblade and Hidden Blades talent together to see how much it would do for Vendetta. It's about 10k. So it doesn't have any single target potential whatsoever. So if you're going to run this trait, you are aware that you're not increasing your single target damage at all, which makes other traits that are more flexible for single or AoE a lot more favorable. Second, the crit for first 5 fan thing part, you know, the first 5 fans on a target that crit will use the AoE ability. That just feels awkward. If that was actually implemented, that means you will have a little bit burst with fan, but then the trait would become absolutely useless after a bit of time of you AoEing the mobs. So you'll get some burst damage that doesn't generate your extra combo points, just purely damage, like pure DPS. So I don't really know. It's weird to write it like that. It's weird that Blizzard even put it that way. What I do like about this trait though, and I think could be used in purely AoE situations. If you got a boss fight and you know the AoE is going to be a issue, go for these traits. And then if you're going to be doing Mythic Pluses and you got a fortified week and the mobs are killer, but the bosses are not that bad, you could actually go for this trait. What I like about it is it doesn't force you to, you know, Phantom Knives deals damage if it hits 3 targets kind of deal. So you can use it on a 2 target cleave, 3 target cleave, multiple different enemies, and the amount of damage it offers you is actually now, I think, worth taking. That's the biggest problem, is I felt like a lot of these AoE traits just didn't give you insane AoE damage, because you're not going to be able to use them on single target anyway. So I feel like for those traits to be competitive, they need to give you real substantial damage. And I feel like this is the first time we've seen for Assassination that actually has real substantial damage for this trait. And I actually very much like it. I think Echoing Blades is exceptionally good for AoE. It's insanely good for AoE by itself. So imagine Subtlety Rogue with an AoE build with Crimson Tempest and everything, and Echoing Blades on top of that. You could actually deal insane amounts of damage. I very much like this change. I very much like this trait, and I feel like it might even give Assassination Rogues a reason to want to go and pump big damage with Echoing Blades in Mythic Plus dungeons, for example. I feel like to make those AoE traits that good, to make them worth running anything at all, is they need to be exceptionally good. And I feel like this is an example of a trait that is finally in that ballpark. Finally, we have one last trait, which we actually cannot test on PTR at all. It is an Outlaw Rogue trait of Keep Your Wits About You. Each time an attack Blade Flurries increase the chance of your Sinister Strike to strike again by 2%. Additional strikes of Sinister Strike deal 286 more damage. We can't really test this trait. We don't really know what part of it is stackable. Is a percentage chance stackable or the damage, which if I were to take a guess, probably the damage part of it is a stackable. So off the bat, I'll say Blade Flurry damage for Outlaw is already good, so this trait is mute. Like, what I'm trying to explain is, Blade Flurry turns any ability into a cleave, so when you have Ace up your sleeve and you get big, chunky crits with between the eyes, all that cleaves. Pistol Shot, Dead Shot build, cleaves. Snake Eyes, even though it's getting nerfed in 8.1, also cleaves. Anything you could think of that is with the spec itself, like non-spec specific traits, those don't cleave, but spec specific bonuses, everything does. I feel like Outlaw never had an issue on AoE. So the fact that Blizzard added an AoE specific trait that only is good for AoE, you already have other traits that work with AoE and single target. And then you're adding us a trait that's purely for AoE, where that's already our strong suit. I don't really know if that does anything. I guess if you're running into a group and let's say you maybe want to go into a tyrannical dungeon, right? You're gonna grab some big DPS that are purely single target and you'll bring the Outlaw to cleave everybody so nobody needs to bring AoE. Maybe then I could see Outlaw running an AoE trait. So far I can't test it, so I'm not going to tell you whether this trait is good or not, but my first thoughts are, my feeling is it might be bad. I do want to test it separately, so I'll probably do a separate video on it since, you know, I'm an Outlaw Rogue main. I'll probably want to check it out and share my findings with you guys, but I don't know, man, that doesn't seem like a decent trait whatsoever. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. There are a few other traits I could have covered. There's very small changes to Subtlety that I've covered either in live streams or mentioned them before in a passing video. Then there's also a few changes to some of the baseline traits being added, like non-spec specific, that I actually love. But this video is too long, so I'll probably cover it in a separate video. If there's any more AZERITE traits to cover, I'll be there to do it for you guys and explain to you what they do and if I think they're good or not. So if anything comes up, let me know and I'll definitely check it out. Thank you guys again really for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. If you guys want to keep up with all the 8.1 updates, especially the ones for rogues, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed this video, give this video a like. Those help me out a lot because it allows my videos to reach a wider audience and grow my channel. We're very kind of getting there towards the 100,000 subscribers. I think it'll be awesome to reach that as a brand new milestone for the channel. It feels like we haven't really had a milestone to reach in some time now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.